A woman receives a $15,000 Rolex from the man who claims to love her. 3 weeks later, that same man brutally murders her in a fit of possessive rage so violent that seasoned homicide detectives still can't discuss the crime scene without taking breaks. But here's what will make your blood boil. Despite overwhelming evidence, a clear motive, and multiple witnesses to his escalating threats, the justice system failed so catastrophically that this monster walks free today while Tasha Monroe's family still fights for answers. If you've ever wondered how killers escape justice in broad daylight, if you've ever felt helpless watching the system fail victims and their families, then you need to hear this story. Because what happened to Tasha Monroe could happen to anyone, and the way law enforcement handled this case will infuriate you beyond belief. Before we dive in, I need to ask you something. How many times have you seen a case this clear-cut get botched by incompetence? Hit that like button if you believe every victim deserves justice, and subscribe right now if you're tired of watching killers walk free while families suffer in silence. We're building a community that refuses to let these cases die in forgotten file cabinets. What would you do if this was your sister, your daughter, your best friend? Keep that question in your mind as we uncover how a love story turned into a nightmare that haunts an entire community. 28-year-old Tasha Monroe had the kind of laugh that could fill an entire room. Her best friend Jennifer Owens still tears up describing how Tasha would throw her head back, completely unself-conscious, when something genuinely amused her. She wasn't trying to be cute or attractive when she laughed, Jennifer remembers. She was just pure joy. That's what I miss most. Tasha worked as a marketing coordinator for a boutique advertising firm in downtown Atlanta. She'd finally landed her dream job after years of grinding through entry-level positions, and she was planning to use her Christmas bonus to visit her elderly grandmother in South Carolina, a trip she'd been promising for months but kept postponing because of work deadlines. She lived alone in a converted loft apartment, the kind of place she'd dreamed about since college. Exposed brick walls, huge windows, a Murphy bed she was ridiculously proud of. Her plants lined every windowsill. She had a gift for keeping things alive, friends said. Succulents, fiddle leaf figs, a spider plant that had grown so large it needed its own corner. Every Tuesday, without fail, Tasha called her mother Joan at exactly 7 p.m. They'd talk for an hour, sometimes more. Joan would update her on family drama, and Tasha would share work stories and dating adventures. These calls were sacred to both of them. I could set my watch by that call, Joan Monroe says, her voice still breaking 3 years later. 7 o'clock on Tuesday, my phone would ring and it would be my baby girl. But here's what nobody knew during those Tuesday calls. Tasha had started mentioning a new man in her life. Someone generous, someone who seemed almost too good to be true. What do you think when someone showers you with expensive gifts early in a relationship? Red flag or romantic gesture? Remember your answer. We'll come back to it. In February 2023, Tasha met Elijah Carter at an upscale wine bar in Buckhead. He was 36, impeccably dressed, driving a luxury car that cost more than most people's annual salary. Elijah owned a high-end car dealership, specializing in European imports, the kind of place where customers paid cash for vehicles most people only see in movies. Their first date lasted 14 hours. They met for drinks at 6 p.m. and didn't part ways until 8 the next morning, having talked through the night at 3 different locations. Tasha texted Jennifer at 9 a.m. I think I met someone special. Within 2 weeks, the gifts started arriving at Tasha's workplace. Designer handbags that her co-workers recognized from fashion magazines, flowers so elaborate they required their own delivery truck, a bottle of champagne that cost more than Tasha's monthly car payment, delivered with a note that simply read, "Because you deserve the best of everything." But the gift that made Tasha's co-workers gasp was the Rolex, $15,000 worth of Swiss precision, delivered on a Thursday afternoon with a card that read, "Time is precious because you're precious to me." Tasha had never owned anything that expensive in her entire life. She was torn between being overwhelmed by the generosity and feeling uncomfortable with the extravagance. She confided in Jennifer, "It's beautiful, but it feels like too much. We've only been dating 6 weeks." Their Instagram told a different story, though. Elijah insisted on documenting everything. Fancy restaurants where entrees cost more than Tasha usually spent on groceries in a week, weekend getaways to Savannah, Miami, Charleston. Tasha looked happy in the photos, but Jennifer noticed something in her friend's eyes that felt forced. She was performing happiness, Jennifer reflects. Tasha was naturally joyful, but in those photos with Elijah it looked like work. The surprise trip to Cabo came in April. Elijah picked Tasha up from work on a Friday afternoon and drove straight to the airport. He'd packed her bags, booked first-class seats, reserved a beachfront suite. Tasha was simultaneously thrilled and overwhelmed. "I couldn't reach her for 4 days," Joan remembers. "She missed our Tuesday call for the first time in 2 years. When she finally called me back, she sounded different, tired." What Tasha didn't tell anyone about the Cabo trip was how controlling Elijah had become. He chose her outfits for dinner. He ordered her meals without asking what she wanted. He insisted they share a phone charger so he could monitor her calls and messages. When Tasha tried to call Jennifer from the hotel room, Elijah suggested they were on vacation from the outside world. Have you ever been in a relationship where generosity felt like a trap, where gifts came with invisible strings attached? The warning signs were there, but they were wrapped in designer paper and delivered with champagne. By early May, Tasha's Tuesday calls with her mother had become shorter and less frequent. She'd cancel plans with friends at the last minute, always with apologetic texts about something coming up with Elijah. Her co-workers noticed she'd stopped eating lunch in the break room, instead taking calls from Elijah in her car. Jennifer confronted her friend on May 15th, exactly 1 week before Tasha's murder. They met for coffee at their usual spot, a small cafe near Tasha's apartment where they'd been meeting for Sunday morning coffee for 3 years. "I asked her directly if everything was okay," Jennifer recalls, "and for the first time in our friendship, Tasha lied to my face. She said everything was perfect, that Elijah was the best thing that ever happened to her, but her hands were shaking, and she kept checking her phone every 30 seconds. That Sunday morning, coffee would be their last conversation. What Jennifer didn't know was that Tasha had already tried to end the relationship 3 times. Each attempt had been met with increasingly dramatic responses from Elijah. Flowers delivered to her workplace with apology notes, showing up at her apartment uninvited with expensive jewelry and tears in his eyes. Once he threatened to hurt himself if she didn't give him one more chance. The pattern was textbook emotional manipulation, but Tasha felt trapped by his generosity. How do you break up with someone who spent thousands of dollars on you? How do you walk away from someone who claims you're the love of their life? On Monday, May 21st, Tasha made a decision that would cost her everything. She returned the Rolex to Elijah's car dealership with a note that read, "I can't do this anymore. Please respect my decision and give me space." That was Tasha's last normal day. She went to work, laughed with her co-workers, watered her plants, planned what she'd cook for dinner. She had no way of knowing that returning that watch had signed her death warrant. Tuesday, May 22nd, 2023. 7 p.m. came and went. Joan Monroe's phone never rang. At 7:30, Joan called Tasha, straight to voicemail. At 8 p.m., she tried again. At 8:30, at 9. By 10 p.m., Joan was calling everyone in Tasha's contact list. Jennifer drove to Tasha's apartment building at 10:45 p.m. The lights were on in Tasha's loft, but she wasn't answering her door or her phone. The building's security guard recognized Jennifer and let her use the master key. What Jennifer found when she opened that door will haunt her for the rest of her life. But the most horrifying part wasn't the crime scene itself. It was what happened next. Because the way law enforcement handled Tasha Monroe's murder would prove that even the most obvious cases can be destroyed by incompetence, indifference, and a system that fails victims when they need justice most. If you're already feeling angry about how this investigation was handled, just wait. The failures you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about how murder cases are supposed to work. The first officers to arrive at Tasha Monroe's apartment treated it like a domestic disturbance call instead of a homicide scene. They didn't secure the perimeter. They didn't call for additional units. They didn't request the medical examiner or crime scene technicians. Instead, they spent 43 minutes walking through an active murder scene, contaminating evidence that could have solved this case in hours instead of years. Here's what investigators found in that loft apartment. Tasha's body had been subjected to what forensic experts call overkill, violence far beyond what was necessary to cause death. The attack showed personal rage, intimate knowledge of the victim, and a perpetrator who wanted to destroy rather than simply kill. The expensive gifts Elijah had given her were scattered throughout the apartment, many of them broken or damaged. The designer handbags had been slashed, the champagne bottles were shattered. Even her beloved plants had been destroyed, their pots smashed and soil scattered across the hardwood floors. But here's what should have made this an open and shut case. Elijah Carter's fingerprints were all over the apartment. His DNA was under Tasha's fingernails. Security cameras captured his distinctive Mercedes leaving the building at 11:47 p.m. on May 22nd. So why isn't he in prison right now? Because the Atlanta Police Department's handling of this case was so incompetent that it reads like a manual on how not to investigate a murder. First failure. The responding officers failed to canvass the building for witnesses. 3 different neighbors heard screaming between 10:30 and 11 p.m. One neighbor, elderly resident Margaret Thompson, actually saw a man matching Elijah's description arguing with Tasha in the building's lobby earlier that evening. Mrs. Thompson called the police station the next morning to report what she'd witnessed. Her call was transferred 4 times and eventually went to voicemail. No one called her back for 6 weeks. Second failure. Despite the obvious signs of a personal crime, investigators never requested Tasha's phone records or social media history. They didn't interview her co-workers, her friends, or her family about recent changes in her behavior. They treated the murder like a random break-in, even though nothing valuable was stolen, and the apartment showed clear signs of rage-motivated violence. Third failure. When Jennifer Owens tried to tell investigators about Elijah Carter and his increasingly possessive behavior, she was told that relationship drama wasn't relevant to the investigation. The detective assigned to the case, Robert Williams, literally said, "We deal in facts, not gossip." Here's a fact, Detective Williams. The number 1 cause of death for women aged 18-34 is homicide by an intimate partner, but apparently that statistic wasn't in your training manual. Fourth failure. Elijah Carter wasn't interviewed until May 30th, 8 days after the murder. By then, he'd had more than a week to dispose of evidence, coordinate alibis, and prepare his story. When investigators finally questioned him, they did so at his car dealership during business hours, treating him like a witness instead of a suspect. During that interview, Elijah claimed he'd been at home alone on the night of the murder, watching television. He couldn't remember what shows he'd watched. He said he'd turned off his phone early and gone to bed, which is why he hadn't heard about Tasha's death until the next morning. Investigators never asked to see his phone records. They never questioned how he'd heard about Tasha's death if his phone was off. They never asked about the security footage that clearly showed his car leaving her building. Fifth failure. The crime scene analysis was outsourced to an understaffed laboratory that took 4 months to process evidence. By the time DNA results confirmed what everyone already knew, that Elijah Carter had been in Tasha's apartment, the case had gone cold and been assigned to a different detective. But here's the failure that will make you lose faith in the system entirely. 3 weeks after the murder, Joan Monroe received a call from Detective Williams. He informed her that they were pursuing other leads and that she should prepare for the possibility that her daughter's killer might never be caught. 3 weeks, 21 days. That's how long it took for law enforcement to give up on Tasha Monroe. Joan refused to accept defeat. She hired a private investigator, retired NYPD detective Thomas Richardson, who had moved to Atlanta after 30 years solving homicides in Manhattan. Richardson agreed to take the case pro bono after reviewing the police file. "I've never seen such fundamental incompetence in 40 years of law enforcement," Richardson said. "This wasn't a difficult case. This was investigative malpractice." Within 2 weeks, Richardson had uncovered evidence that police had missed or ignored. Elijah Carter had a documented history of stalking behavior with previous girlfriends. 3 different women had filed restraining orders against him over the past 5 years. All 3 orders had been dismissed or allowed to expire without prosecution. One of those women, Sarah Mitchell, had reported that Elijah threatened to destroy her if she ever tried to leave him. Another, Catherine Brooks, said he'd shown up at her workplace with expensive gifts after she'd broken up with him, refusing to accept that their relationship was over. Richardson also discovered that Elijah had purchased zip ties, bleach and plastic sheeting from 3 different stores on May 21st, the day before Tasha's murder. Security footage from these purchases still existed, but police had never thought to look for it. Most damning of all, Richardson found that Elijah's car dealership had GPS tracking on all vehicles, including Elijah's personal Mercedes. The GPS data showed his car at Tasha's building from 10:23 p.m. to 11:47 p.m. on the night of the murder. This evidence was sitting in a database that police could have accessed with a single phone call. They never made that call. By September 2023, Richardson had built what he called the most airtight murder case I've ever seen. He presented his findings to the district attorney's office, confident that an arrest warrant would be issued within days. Instead, he was told that too much time had passed, too much evidence had been compromised, and that prosecuting Elijah Carter would be challenging given the police department's initial mishandling of the case. The DA's office was unwilling to risk a high-profile loss on a case that had become a symbol of investigative incompetence. They suggested that Joan Monroe should focus on healing rather than pursuing justice. Meanwhile, Elijah Carter continued living his life as if nothing had happened. He kept his car dealership open. He went on dates. He posted vacation photos on social media. 3 months after murdering Tasha Monroe, he was photographed at a charity gala, smiling for the cameras while wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The community's response was swift and furious. A Facebook group called Justice for Tasha Monroe grew to 15,000 members within weeks. Local news stations picked up the story, highlighting the investigation's failures and the family's fight for accountability. But public outrage doesn't change forensic evidence that's been contaminated. It doesn't recover witness statements that were never taken. It doesn't undo 4 months of investigative incompetence that allowed a killer to walk free. Jennifer Owens organized candlelight vigils every Tuesday at 7 p.m., the time when Tasha used to call her mother. These vigils grew from a handful of friends to hundreds of community members demanding justice. Tasha deserved better, Jennifer said at one vigil. She deserved investigators who cared enough to do their jobs. She deserved a system that values women's lives. She deserved justice, and we failed her. Joan Monroe's health deteriorated rapidly during this period. The stress of fighting for justice while grieving her daughter caused severe panic attacks and insomnia. She lost 30 pounds and was hospitalized twice for exhaustion. "I can't sleep knowing that man is free," Joan said. "Every night I lie awake thinking about what my daughter went through, knowing that the person who did it to her is sleeping peacefully in his own bed." The psychological toll on Tasha's loved ones was compounded by a growing sense of helplessness. They had evidence, they had witnesses, they had a clear motive and a suspect with no alibi. But they didn't have a justice system willing to pursue the truth. As 2023 turned into 2024, the case officially went cold. Detective Williams retired, taking no responsibility for his failures. The crime scene evidence was transferred to long-term storage. Elijah Carter's GPS data was automatically deleted after the standard retention period expired. But Joan Monroe refused to give up hope. She used her life savings to keep private investigator Richardson on the case. She attended every city council meeting, demanding accountability and reform. She started a non-profit organization focused on supporting families of murder victims whose cases had been mishandled by law enforcement. Do you think there was a cover-up or just incompetence? What would you have done if you were Tasha's family? The questions surrounding this case go deeper than just one failed investigation. They reveal systematic problems that put every victim at risk. Because here's what terrifies everyone following this case. If investigators can botch something this obvious, if a killer can walk free despite overwhelming evidence, then how many other murderers are living normal lives because law enforcement couldn't be bothered to do their jobs properly? But the story doesn't end there. In early 2024, something happened that gave Joan Munro reason to hope again, something that proved her 3-year fight for justice hadn't been in vain. In March 2024, everything changed when the Georgia Bureau of Investigation announced the formation of a specialized cold case task force, specifically designed to review cases that had been mishandled by local law enforcement. Tasha Munro's murder was selected as one of the task force's first 10 cases. Leading the reinvestigation is Detective Amanda Foster, a 20-year veteran of the GBI with a success rate that's legendary among law enforcement circles. Foster has solved 37 cold cases in her career, including several that had been dormant for decades. The Munro case represents everything wrong with modern homicide investigation, Foster said, but it also represents everything that can go right when you apply proper investigative techniques to solid evidence. Foster's team immediately identified 43 investigative failures in the original case file. They began systematically addressing each one, using modern forensic techniques and investigative technology that wasn't utilized in 2023. The new investigation has already uncovered evidence that completely changes the timeline of Tasha's murder. Advanced DNA analysis revealed genetic material from an unknown third party in Tasha's apartment, evidence that was overlooked in the original testing. More importantly, the GBI's digital forensics team recovered data from Tasha's phone and laptop that the Atlanta PD had failed to examine. This data included threatening text messages, emails documenting Elijah's escalating behavior, and a voice recording Tasha had made on her phone just hours before her death. In that recording, Tasha can be heard saying, "If something happens to me, Elijah Carter is responsible. I'm scared of what he might do. I'm making this recording in case I don't get to tell anyone myself." The recording was made at 6:47 p.m. on May 22, 2023, just hours before her murder. It's the smoking gun that investigators should have found 3 years ago. But Detective Foster's investigation has revealed something even more disturbing. Elijah Carter may not have acted alone. The unknown DNA evidence suggests the possibility of an accomplice, and cell phone tower data indicates that 2 different phones were active in the vicinity of Tasha's apartment during the time of the murder. "We're looking at this as potentially being a conspiracy," Foster confirmed. "Someone may have helped Carter plan or execute this crime, and that person is also walking free." The reinvestigation has also uncovered evidence of witness intimidation. 2 neighbors who had initially agreed to speak with police in 2023 later recanted their statements, claiming they'd been mistaken about what they'd seen. Foster's team discovered that both neighbors had received visits from unknown men shortly after their initial police interviews. One neighbor, who asked to remain anonymous, told investigators that a man claiming to be Carter's lawyer had visited her apartment and suggested that false testimony could result in legal consequences for her. The neighbor, an elderly woman living alone, was too frightened to maintain her original statement. The GBI has also uncovered financial irregularities in Carter's business dealings that suggest possible connections to organized crime. The luxury car dealership appeared to be laundering money through fraudulent sales, and several of Carter's business associates have criminal backgrounds related to money laundering and racketeering. "This case is bigger than just intimate partner violence," Foster said. "We're dealing with someone who had the resources and connections to cover up a murder, intimidate witnesses, and potentially corrupt the original investigation." In response to these revelations, the Atlanta Police Department has launched an internal affairs investigation into Detective Williams's handling of the case. Williams has been subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury about his investigative decisions and his failure to pursue obvious leads. Meanwhile, Joan Munro's non-profit organization, Tasha's Voice, has become a powerful force for criminal justice reform in Georgia. The organization has successfully lobbied for legislation requiring independent review of all homicide cases that remain unsolved after 6 months. "My daughter's death can't be meaningless," Joan said. "If her case helps prevent other families from going through what we've endured, then some good will come from this nightmare." The community response to the reinvestigation has been overwhelming. The Justice for Tasha Murd3r Facebook group has grown to over 50,000 members, including people from around the world who have been following the case. Tips and leads continue to pour in daily. One of the most promising leads came from a woman in Florida who recognized Elijah Carter's photo from news coverage. She contacted the GBI to report that Carter had approached her in a Miami nightclub in August 2023, just 3 months after Tasha's murder. "He was very charming, very generous," the woman reported. "He bought expensive drinks, talked about his business, seemed like he had a lot of money. But something felt off about him. When I declined his invitation to dinner, he became very aggressive, very angry. He said women like me didn't understand what they were giving up." The woman's description of Carter's behavior matches the pattern that investigators have identified in his relationships with other women. The GBI is now actively investigating whether Carter may have targeted other victims. Technology has also provided new hope for solving the case. The GBI's forensic laboratory is using advanced techniques that weren't available in 2023, including enhanced DNA analysis and digital evidence recovery. Most significantly, the lab has been able to recover deleted text messages from Carter's phone through advanced data mining techniques. These messages, sent to an unknown recipient on the night of the murder, include statements like, "It's done," and "She won't be a problem anymore." The recipient of these messages has been identified through phone records as Vincent Rodriguez, a known associate of Carter's with a criminal history, including assault and intimidation. Rodriguez has been brought in for questioning, but has so far refused to cooperate with investigators. Social media has played a crucial role in keeping Tasha's case in the public eye. True crime podcasts have featured her story, reaching millions of listeners worldwide. TikTok videos about the case have generated tens of millions of views, with creators highlighting the investigation's failures and calling for justice. This digital attention has generated hundreds of tips from around the country. While most haven't led to significant breakthroughs, several have provided valuable information about Carter's activities and associates. The renewed attention has also prompted other women to come forward with their own experiences with Elijah Carter. 5 additional women have now reported similar patterns of obsessive behavior, expensive gifts followed by controlling demands, and threats when they tried to end relationships with him. One of these women, Jessica Wilson, reported that Carter had threatened to make her disappear when she tried to break up with him in 2022. Wilson filed a police report at the time, but no charges were filed because Carter claimed the threat was just emotional language. "I've lived in fear for 2 years," Wilson said. "When I heard about what happened to Tasha, I knew it could have been me. It should have been investigated properly from the beginning." The GBI investigation has also revealed that Carter left the state immediately after the murder, spending several weeks in various cities across the southeast. Hotel records, credit card transactions, and cell phone data have allowed investigators to track his movements during this period. Disturbingly, investigators have identified 3 unsolved murders of young women in cities Carter visited during this time period. While no direct connections have been established, the GBI is working with local law enforcement agencies to determine whether Carter may be responsible for additional crimes. Current status: as of July 2024, the GBI's Cold Case Task Force continues to actively investigate Tasha Murd3r's murder. The case has been assigned the highest priority level, with 6 full-time investigators and forensic specialists working exclusively on solving it. Detective Foster reports that they are close to making arrests in connection with the case. While she cannot reveal specific details about ongoing investigative activities, she has confirmed that multiple suspects are under surveillance and that arrest warrants are being prepared. "We have identified everyone responsible for Tasha's death," Foster said. "It's not a matter of if we'll make arrests, it's a matter of when. The evidence is overwhelming and justice will be served." Joan Murd3r's faith in the justice system has been partially restored by Detective Foster's dedication to the case. While the pain of losing her daughter will never diminish, she finds hope in knowing that professionals are finally treating Tasha's murder with the seriousness it deserved from the beginning. For the first time in 3 years, I believe that the people who killed my daughter will face consequences, Joan said. Detective Foster has given me something I thought I'd never have again, hope for justice. The case has also sparked broader conversations about domestic violence, investigative standards, and the resources dedicated to solving violent crimes. Law enforcement agencies across the country have used Tasha's case as a training example of how not to conduct a homicide investigation. Several police departments have implemented new protocols for handling intimate partner violence cases, requiring specialized training for investigators and mandatory consultation with domestic violence experts. The Georgia legislature has also passed Tasha's Law, which requires independent oversight of homicide investigations that remain unsolved after 90 days. The law has already resulted in the reopening of dozens of cold cases across the state. How the public can help. The GBI continues to seek information from anyone who may have knowledge about Tasha Monroe's murder or Elijah Carter's activities. They are particularly interested in hearing from anyone who knew Carter personally or professionally, women who may have had romantic relationships with Carter, people who may have witnessed unusual activity at Carter's car dealership, anyone with information about Carter's associates or business dealings, people who may have seen Carter in other cities during the weeks following Tasha's murder. Tips can be submitted anonymously through the GBI's tip line at 1-800-597-TIPS or online at gbi.georgia.gov. A reward of $50,000 is being offered for information leading to arrests in the case. The investigation has also benefited from crowdsourced detective work by true crime enthusiasts who have analyzed publicly available information and identified potential leads. Several tips from amateur investigators have provided valuable information to the GBI. Social media campaigns continue to keep Tasha's story visible, using hashtags like Justice for Tasha and Seek Tasha's Voice to share updates and maintain public awareness of the case. Community impact. Tasha Monroe's murder and the subsequent investigation failures have had a lasting impact on Atlanta's communities, particularly among women who recognize how easily they could have been in Tasha's situation. The case has prompted many women to reassess their own relationships and recognize warning signs of possessive or controlling behavior. Local domestic violence organizations report a significant increase in calls for help and requests for safety planning assistance. Tasha's story has opened conversations that women weren't having before, said Maria Santos, director of the Atlanta Women's Center. Women are talking about the difference between generosity and control, about trust and manipulation. These are conversations that could save lives. The case has also highlighted the importance of community support for victims' families. Joan Monroe has received emotional and financial support from thousands of people who have followed her daughter's case, demonstrating the power of collective action in demanding justice. New technology hope. Advances in forensic science continue to provide new possibilities for solving cold cases like Tasha's. The GBI's laboratory is using cutting-edge DNA analysis techniques that can extract genetic profiles from increasingly degraded samples. Digital forensics capabilities have also expanded dramatically, allowing investigators to recover data that would have been permanently lost just a few years ago. These technological advances give hope that even cases with compromised evidence can still be solved. The GBI is also using advanced data analysis software to identify patterns and connections that might not be apparent to human investigators. This technology has already revealed previously unknown links between suspects and has generated new investigative leads. Family's current hope. Joan Monroe continues to believe that justice for her daughter is within reach. She speaks regularly with Detective Foster and remains actively involved in the investigation while also working to prevent similar tragedies through her non-profit organization. "I wake up every morning believing that today might be the day we get answers," Joan said. "Detective Foster and her team have given me reason to hope again. They've shown me that there are still people in law enforcement who truly care about victims and their families." Jennifer Owens, Tasha's best friend, has also found purpose in advocating for justice reform and supporting other families affected by violence. She continues to organize memorial events and awareness campaigns to keep Tasha's memory alive. Tasha would want her story to help other women, Jennifer said. She would want people to recognize the warning signs she missed. She would want her death to mean something, to change things for the better. The search for answers continues, and hope never dies. If unsolved mysteries like this move you, stories of young women whose lives were cut short by violence, families who refuse to give up, and the belief that truth will eventually surface, then you're exactly where you belong. Hit that like button if this story made you feel something, and you believe answers are still out there. And listen, if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Every single week, we dive deep into cases that law enforcement gave up on, stories that mainstream media won't touch, and mysteries that deserve answers. Your subscription literally helps us investigate more cases, reach more families, and maybe, just maybe, help solve these crimes. We're not just telling stories here, we're fighting for justice one case at a time. Subscribe right now and join our growing army of truth seekers who refuse to let these cases die in forgotten file cabinets. Hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss what we uncover next. Some of these revelations will absolutely blow your mind. And please share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who might hold a piece of the puzzle. What detail in this case bothered you the most? What do you think investigators should have done differently? Do you have theories about what really happened? Let us know in the comments below. Your perspective might be exactly what's needed to crack this case. Do you have information about this case? Don't hesitate to contact the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Even the smallest detail could be the breakthrough investigators need. What unsolved mystery should we explore next? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, remember, the search for answers continues, and every case deserves to be solved. If you or someone you know has information about Tasha Munro's murder, please contact the GBI Cold Case Task Force at 1-800-597-TIPS or submit an anonymous tip at gbi.georgia.gov. Your call could bring a family the answers they've been waiting for.